Hey everybody, Alvin here with another video. Thanks for tuning in. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about gimbals. Now, why would anyone ever need a gimbal? If you've ever thought about upgrading your production quality and getting stabilized, smooth cinematic footage, well, maybe a gimbal is the tool for you. Now, what I have here is the Zhiyun Crane M2. This gimbal was released last year, July 2019, and it's one of the more travel-friendly gimbals out there on the market. It supports most of your mirrorless cameras, point-and-shoot cameras, as well as smartphones and action cameras. So it's a very attractive option for keeping your gimbal and camera package light and small and compact. So price-wise, this thing comes in retail at $270, give or take. You can usually find it on Amazon for around $200 brand new when there are promotions going on. And you can also find it used for about $120 to $150 out on the internet. So just do your research to see if you can find good deals out there, because there are some good deals to be had. So let's talk about some of the specs. So this guy weighs in about 500 grams or 1.1 pounds, and it can handle a payload of about 720 grams or maybe 1.5 pounds, give or take. So perfect for mirrorless cameras or point and shoot cameras. I currently have the Canon G7X Mark II mounted onto this thing, and it balances pretty easily. So I think any camera like that or your smartphone or action cameras shouldn't have any problems being balanced on this gimbal. Now let's talk about some of the features on this gimbal. So as you can see here, it's made out of plastic. It's not the highest quality, but it's not cheap either. It's very doable, helps keep it lightweight. That's something that's very important when you want to have a travel gimbal. Last thing you need is something that's extra heavy and bulky, weighing down your backpack. And I think they did a decent job of compromising between having decent quality plastics and weight. It comes with a tripod attachment. This comes in handy when you want to set down the gimbal. It also comes in handy by being an extension of the gimbal. That way it makes it more ergonomic in the hands. I love to have the tripod on at all times. That way I can easily set the gimbal down whenever I need to. And again, I can have that extra leverage on the handle. It has a few different features. It has a joystick here, an LCD screen. There's a record button so that you can start recording from the gimbal itself if you're connected via Wi-Fi. There's a mode button so you can change through the different modes on the gimbal itself. There's also a zoom button here where you can control the zoom of the camera, again if you're connected via Wi-Fi. There's a menu button so you can go through the menu, and one of the best additions to these later release gimbals is that you're able to do a lot of your customization internally in the gimbal itself. Previously, you would have to go through the actual manufacturer's app and set the customized features that way. But now most of them can be set on the gimbal itself, so that's a bonus. The power button, and you also have a trigger button here in the back. You can toggle this from pan follow mode to follow mode by activating this trigger. Now this red button here, it's actually a switch, and what that does is allows you to lock the gimbal in place so that when you're traveling, you can actually keep this axis held steady. That way you don't have to worry about this thing rotating around when you have in your backpack. Older gimbals did not have these locking features, and that was a pain to deal with. So it's very cool to see that newer gimbals are incorporating that automatically. There is also a USB Type-C port here. This allows you to charge the gimbal. It also comes with a quick release plate. That way it helps with making balancing the gimbal a lot easier, as well as storage. So all I have to do here is hit this button and I can remove the camera quite easily. Now, there are some markings on the quick release plate, so that helps me with reassembling the camera onto the gimbal and getting my balance done more quickly. So I can actually put the camera onto the gimbal, match up the markings on the quick release plate to what I set it to, tighten the quick release plate here, and I should be pretty much set to the last spot that I had it anchored to. They also have this little anchor here, and what that does is it allows you to set the position of where you balanced your gimbal. So you can move this back and forth for storage, and when you're ready to set the gimbal back up, you can slide it up to that little stop and then tighten the axis in place. And there you have your preset marking. So all you have to do now is actually attach the camera via the quick release plate and then turn the camera on, and you're pretty much balanced. Now, I'm very well balanced and I don't even have the power of the gimbal turned on. So when I turn it on, there it is, perfectly balanced. So this helps cut down the balancing time quite a bit. Again, your older gimbals, there was quite a pain trying to make sure that all the axes are properly aligned and you have the right balancing. These newer gimbals, they make it a lot easier for you to balance the gimbal. So kudos to the manufacturers for always looking out for the consumer and making sure that these painful steps are getting simplified over newer release models. Let's dive into the menu system. So this gimbal is equipped with most of the common menus and modes that you would see on a Zhiyun Crane gimbal. So the first mode is pan follow mode. So that's basically helps lock the tilt axis. So it keeps the camera basically straight forward, but allows you to pan left and right without the camera floating up and down. You can move it up and down, but you can still see that the camera is still pointing forward. Now, only way you can actually move the actual position of the camera is if you push the joystick up or down. In follow mode, you have a lot more flexibility. Anywhere that you point the camera, the gimbal will respond. You can activate follow mode by touching the trigger here, and what you can do is you can hold that so you can easily release it and enter pan follow mode again, or you can tap it once and it stays in follow mode the entire time. The next mode is locked mode. So this basically keeps the camera steady and locked in its own position. So no matter what you do, I can move this thing up and down, left and right. It's always gonna stay fixated on my subject in front of me unless I use the joystick to manually position the camera. And then wherever I positioned it last, it will stay in that position and I can then stay locked from there. Then there's POV mode. So basically this is almost like follow mode, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility in some of your diagonal movements. So you can see here the camera is actually following my hand motion and the gimbal is also following that as well. So this gives you some more dreamy effects, more of like a vertigo effect. So it's a pretty neat feature, but again, always use sparingly. There's the vortex mode, which basically allows you to get some of your 360 and barrel movement shots. Pretty cool. And last but not least, you have go mode, which basically allows you to track fast moving subjects by allowing the gimbal to respond quickly to your arm movements. No matter where you point the camera, it moves a lot quicker than it normally would in typical follow mode. The gimbal also has the ability to connect via Wi-Fi to your smartphone. So if you download the Zhiyun Play app, you have the ability to control the gimbal from your phone. You're now looking at side-by-side footage to compare the stabilization of the Crane M2 on the left and handheld with camera attached to a Joby GorillaPod on the right. Now, to keep this true to a real-world vlogging scenario, I am walking as I normally would, no ninja walking, on uneven terrain to see how much camera shake is introduced into the footage. And as you can see, The image on the left is definitely more stable. There's not too much aggressive movement, whereas the footage on the right has a lot more camera shake. If you look at the fence in the background, it's moving around quite a lot. So are the trees, while the footage on the left is actively smoothing out those micro jitters. It's not perfect, but it's definitely an improvement over handheld. So what do I like most about this gimbal? It would have to be the size and the form factor. I mean, this thing is pretty small compared to some of the other gimbals I've purchased before. This thing is pretty light and compact, and you can easily just carry this with you in your backpack without really being burdened down by the weight of this thing. Now, obviously you're limited by what size camera you can put on that, but I think for the average person that's gonna opt for this gimbal, they're not looking for large cameras with better production quality value. I think they just want to have something that's easy and compact and lightweight to travel with and just get some stabilized footage. Some of the pain points, I would say this LCD is a little bit too small. Now it is pretty standard size for most of the Zhiyun Crane gimbals out there, but I think it would benefit by having a larger screen. That way you don't have to kind of peep down to see what you're actually changing in the menus. It's a little bit hard to read. I do think it's bright enough, but I think if you had a larger display, maybe a display that takes up this much real estate, I think you can get away with that without making the gimbal much bigger. Now, another thing I don't like so much is this joystick is easily removable. Now, that can be a huge problem because if I'm able to remove this that easily, this thing can basically get lost out there, and I will have no way of operating my gimbal unless I connect it via the Play app. I do think you have more control with the joystick on the gimbal, so losing that will be a huge issue. And lastly, I would say, although you do have the ability to connect via Wi-Fi and control the gimbal via your smartphone, I still think that the app needs some more refinement with some of the controls. You don't really feel like you have the best control of the gimbal as you maneuver it via your smartphone. I just think they have to fine-tune that a little bit more before I feel comfortable using that out in the field. So there you have it, just a little review on the Zhiyun Crane M2. If you like what you heard in this video and you decide you want to pick one up for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description below. Thanks for watching this video, and until then, I'll see you on the next one.